Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our discussion today on unmanned aerial vehicles in a fire and rescue environment. I'm going to flick between the description of drones and unmanned aerial vehicles. Probably going to get to drones at the most. You'll see on the first slide there's a QR code. If you can scan that at the start of the session, and then there's one on the final slide, that gives you the opportunity to get a CPD certificate that you can either print yourselves or you can collect, and there'll be details of where you can collect it. Just to introduce myself very quickly, my name's Phil Martin. I'm the editor of UK Fire Magazine. I work with MDM Publications, who are the media partners to MSA, and we're grateful for them inviting us along today. We have a distinguished panel of speakers here this morning that represent a broad range across the spectrum of unmanned aerial vehicles. And it's my privilege really to have met them last night and to be working with them today. So if I can briefly give you an introduction, we have, over to my left, we have Gemma Alcock, who is the CEO of Skybound Rescuer. We have Julia Fedorova, who is the UK Fire and Rescue Lead for Firekite. We have Jason Trainer, who is the General Manager on the Global Fire and Rescue Market for MSA Safety. We have Lee Newman, who is the Drone Manager for the London Fire Brigade. And finally, Simon Stretch, who is a drone operator with the London Fire Brigade. So we've got 30 minutes to cover a subject that I'm sure could take all morning. I'll try and keep it interesting and succinct, and I'm going to try and keep these people from sharing everything they know in that time, but trust me, it's very interesting. So if I might start, please, with Julia. Can you give me some examples, or give the audience some examples of some successful deployments of drones in an emergency service environment, please?
1, 2. First one. Hi. Yes, well, drones are very useful when it comes to getting an aerial view of the scenes. So situations such as crowd management during busy events, so marathons, concerts, festivals, traffic accident scenes where drones can be used to record the evidence and the post-scene sort of evaluation, as well as obviously fires and using drones to identify hotspots in the burning objects. All of those instances are where drones started to be more and more prevalent in providing that instant situational awareness. And looking at two types of drones, free-flowing drones and tethered drones, by combining them together, we can get, well, sort of the best of the both worlds. In tethered drone scenarios, you get the pretty much unlimited flight time, unlimited situational awareness, whereas with free-flying drones, you get the flexibility of evaluation of the scenes from all of the angles. By combining the two, you can, I think you can benefit the most in all of the various scenarios, from car crashes, traffic accidents, fire scenes, and other scenarios.
Okay, thank you for that, Julia. Lee, could I ask you a question? One of the most visible early uses of drones, I think, in the UK Fire and Rescue Service was, of course, post-Grenfell in the immediate aftermath of that. Could you perhaps just describe the benefits and the use of those at that incident?
Can you hear me? Right. Yeah, so in 2017, obviously, the tragic events at Grenfell was when the LFB first really saw drones being used. With London, we've got an MOU with Kent, our neighbouring fire service. They actually had a drone team already set up. So immediately after the fire phase of Grenfell, we went into the recovery phase. So we was deploying USAR crews to go into the building and make sure it was safe, do some shoring, because there was some structural issues with the building. So what Kent did is they brought their drone up and they was able to fly around the building because you couldn't get full access around it. So they flew the drone up. What they would do is they would identify sort of risks and some hazards, so falling masonry or windows that are hanging out the building. They'd land it. I'd run with the SD card back to our control unit. Then I'd brief USAR crews. So using the footage, because we didn't have streaming, they didn't have streaming back then, obviously that's progressed since. So I'd get a crew in, I'd say, right, this is floor 20, this is the window that needs to be braced up or made safe. They'd look at it and then they'd go and do their tasking, and then we'd basically do that all day going around the building, and then they worked with DVI because they couldn't get onto the roof. So they sent the drone up, they was looking on the roof for stuff that DVI were interested in, but it actually really proved quite beneficial because we couldn't get crews up to that point, and also for structural engineers were using it because they was putting little markers all around the building to do the laser measuring. So again, the drone was flying around, capturing images for them, seeing which bits of the building need to be kept an eye on the most. And that was the foundation of London Fire Brigade's drone project, because from that the recommendations came that actually we need to look into this capability, and that's how London started. And obviously 5 years later we've like progressed quite well. So yeah, that's how drones were used at Grenfell.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. I think for London Fire Brigade's experience, it was there, by working with Kent, it was very clear to them. A question for yourself, if I may, Gemma. I think we have a tradition in the fire service of sometimes being sceptical about new technology and its use. What would you say to persuade people that drones aren't just a gimmick, and how do you deal with the naysayers in terms of introducing this type of technology into fire and emergency services?
So I think it's been quite different for each emergency service. There's been naysayers in their own way. Especially when I started out in this space, it was 2014, so it was a very new place. There wasn't as many success stories to kind of fall back on. So, for example, with police forces, it was slightly easier in that they had MPAS, so they had a reference point. They knew the value of air support, but they also knew the challenges of manned aviation in that it's very expensive. And so because it's expensive, there's not many aircrafts, so it's few and far between, so there's poor availability. So then when drones were being introduced, you can draw that comparison of like the cost savings, the better accessibility, and therefore the better response times because you have the drone with you. So with fire services, it was slightly different in that they didn't have that reference point. I had to almost convince them more of the value of air support. And so I did a rescue drone awareness course for a lot of fire services so that they could experience the technology, see the difference of the view on the ground versus the view in the sky, and the benefit that could bring to them. So when I was doing feasibility studies with police forces, it focused on cost savings and better availability, whereas with fire services, it was more about better decision making, better safety from having that air support available. So it was really the same data, but it's how you tell that story around that data to prove the value in a language that they would understand and appreciate, solving their problems rather than drones in general.
Okay, thank you very much. Jason, could I move on to yourself, please? Can I just ask, from MSA's perspective, you've had some clear advantages with working with fire and rescue services around the world in the development of your products. Can you tell me, is that something that's been welcomed? And do you find that there's a lot of innovation that comes from the end users, which you're able to use to develop your products?
Yeah, so voice of customer, or what we would refer to as going out and identifying unmet needs, talking to the end users, understanding what do you love about your product today, what do you wish could be different, and then going back with our team to be able to iterate and bring prototypes forward to test product and understand are we solving problems that, as you mentioned, solving problems that exist today has been extremely welcome. So we had not only in North America but here in the UK, throughout Europe, a lot of input into the design of our product and understanding the needs for decontamination, the needs for the connectivity of the product, understanding local radio protocols. All of those things came from end users in end user interviews, discussions that we had with them, and then further investment into the product. So for us, listening to the customer, understanding where there's opportunity, and then acting upon it and demonstrating that, hey, we listened, and this is the product that you helped us design, has been really successful for us. So it's been welcomed, and it's a core part of how we innovate.
Okay, thank you for that. So that leads me nicely to a question for you, Simon. As a drone operator, and understanding that sometimes our wish lists now are constrained financially, but also the public perception of what we invest in as public services has changed. What would be the top of your wish list in your role, and what capabilities would you like to see to assist you in doing what you do?
Yeah, morning everyone. So for us personally, keeping on top of the technology is the hardest thing, because as we know, it's evolving so much, and we know that our procurement operations are very in-depth and challenging. So for us personally, we lease all of our drone equipment. And what that does is twofold. We're not flying old equipment over the centre of London, and also we're keeping on top of the technology. So as products are evolving all the time really quickly, we're keeping ahead of that. So that for us, that's the main benefit. Going on from what Lee was saying earlier, obviously back when Grenfell happened, it was quite a basic drone operation, but now as we've evolved with the technology and keeping on top of it, as part of our wish list we're now doing 2D, 3D modelling. So if we'd have had that with Grenfell, we could have 3D modelled the whole building. You can get accurate measurements from that. So for me, wish list wise, it's just keeping on top of the technology and using everything we can in a 999 response, really.
Okay, and that's quite interesting, because I think agility in terms of future technology for public services is quite a difficult thing to achieve. So that's interesting that the leasing option, I guess, gives you the opportunity to review that.
Yeah, and not just with drones. So one of the discussions Lee's having at the moment is trying to set up a new technology department in the fire brigade, because they're quite old-fashioned. So Lee's idea is to set up a new technology department to look at submersible drones, to look at rescue robots, all that sort of stuff, because it doesn't really fit into London Fire Brigade at the moment. So that's another option we're looking at now.
Okay, thank you. So continuing on the theme of developments, Gemma, what do you think are the untapped capabilities of drones in the emergency services?
So I would say that we are just at the tip of the iceberg at the moment with what drones can actually achieve. So for example, we have relatively small drone teams covering large areas, and we can't, in most cases, fly direct to the incident site. We have to drive the drone there, then set up, and then start flying. And then it's 500 meters from the drone pilot, so it's covering quite a small area. So these things combined mean that there's often slow response times and low availability of drone teams, because they can't meet that growing demand for drones, and they can't get there quickly. They can't fly direct to the incident. And then also, most emergency services have worked in silos when setting up their drone capabilities, which means there's very little in the way of shared national standards for the drones we're using, the training we receive, the mission tactics we follow, and this is leading to varied unreliable performance in some cases. So although there's a growing number of success stories, we really are at the tip of the iceberg. Some things are not just around the technology, it is regulation as well, being able to fly beyond visual line of sight. But something that we're doing at Skybound is we are building an emergency drone network, which will be a network of automated drones for any emergency service to task on demand. And we've built software that creates data-driven decisions for the end-to-end process of that mission, from assessing its viability to assigning a priority to creating its mission plans, so that these things can happen in seconds. And then the stations itself, they're going to be placed in hotspots of risk so that we can offer 5-minute response times where it's most needed. So that obviously we need the regulation to be able to control that from a central control room, which is a key part of that puzzle as well. But that's where the technology is going, is that eventually we won't need to wait for an on-site drone pilot. It will be automated, and then it can help those people on the ground much faster, and the drone can become the first eyes on scene, so that before you even get there, you have that real-time situational awareness picture, so you can create your plan before you've even arrived.
Okay, thank you. Simon, I'm going to come back to you now, because that opens up another question. If we had a world in which interoperability in the operational sense was was easy to achieve. What do you think we could see in terms of future UAV technology sharing with other services?
Yeah, I think it's endless, really. As Gemma said, the interoperability bit is quite difficult because everyone's keeps everything to themselves. We've been quite keen in London to try and open it up, and we've got hit a lot of barriers with other users. So, we work with the RNLI, we work with the ambulance service, we've tried to work with the police, and it's challenging. But I've forgotten where I was going, actually.
Okay, no, so you've got some proven examples of where you have worked with the other service, and I know we were discussing the RNLI last night, which in itself is an interesting concept. So you think that the opportunities are there? It's just creating that willingness and that environment to do.
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And I think Gemma's idea is quite a good one. If you could work together. Gemma also touched on the regulators as well. I do think the regulators need to change. It's quite rigid, the rulings, and I think it's quite an old-fashioned system. So I think if the regulators changed their approach, it would make drone use a lot easier for multiple users at once.
Right. Okay. Lee, go on.
Just to touch on the interoperability, we've already kind of started doing that because we've actually worked with the RNLI to live stream our feed into tablets on their boats. When we had a bomb job in Kingston a couple of years ago, we actually streamed our footage into the police gold control. So we've actually tried to start making those pathways. We've also worked with the BTP. They've come onto our jobs. So it's how you make the connection. So that work has started to take place. And obviously Gemma's future is actually there'll just be drones for all the services, I'm guessing. So we are starting to do it, but it is, as Simon says, it's quite hard work to try and break into other people's policies and procedures. I just want to say that.
Right. Okay, Julia, earlier you talked about tethered drones, and I think that's fairly new technology in the emergency service. Just wonder if you could just outline what the advantages are over a tethered drone, because at first sight it might look like you're restricting the capability of it, but I know that's not the case.
Thanks for that. Yeah, interesting point. If we are looking at the tethered drones, well, it's basically the drone just goes up and down and stays there for as long as your mission requires it. It uses the tether as a power supply. So in essence, once you put it up, it can stay up there as long as you've got your vehicle running, a power generator, or an active power source. What does it mean for you as a first responder? It means that you don't have to dedicate resources to actively piloting the systems. Rather, you can focus on coordinating the teams on the ground with the feed that you're getting whilst the drone is there doing the job for you. Other advantages of the tethered drones are obviously the power that they get is way much more than what they could get from the batteries. That means they can stay more stable in windy environments. That means that they don't require additional piloting to keep the system up in a kind of hazardous conditions where traditional drones would probably give you 15 to 20 minutes flight time before you have to land it and change the batteries and send it up again. And to chime in a little bit on the regulation topic that was touched, in the US, we have had quite a success with lobbying the the FAA of the US by proving that tethered systems are kind of a safer alternative to, for situational awareness in comparison with free-flying drones because, it's on the tether, can't fly away. So in US, photokites, our tethered system, can be operated without drone pilot license at all. In UK, we're still working with the likes of Simon and Lee to educate CAA on the benefits of such systems. In Europe as well, because they are subject to European rules, once you convince one CAA of, say, France, it's way easier to then go to Germany, Austria, elsewhere to prove the cases of safe uses of tethered drones. But it only happens when we actually got people on the ground, such as Simon and Lee, bringing in those success stories and demanding the technology from the field.
Okay, thank you. Jason, I've got a question for you, and it sort of links in with the wider emergency service opportunities that might be there. In terms of drone technology and wider connected firefighter and potentially connected emergency service technology. Where do you see the future being in terms of maybe 3, 5 and 7 years?
So I think as it relates to connected products more broadly, but specifically for emergency services, it's really going to be around data, understanding the collection of data, number one, and then the analysis of data as we look forward. So from a self-contained breathing apparatus standpoint, we look at how the product's used, what's it been exposed to. All of those things can then inform preventative maintenance algorithms that are predictive about the way the product works. I think we could say the same about on-scene incident command, understanding the ability to have a look back and see, how did things change throughout the incident? What might we do differently? So that collection of data, I think, is critically important. When we look beyond that, on the horizon a little bit, I think it'll be a better understanding of the individual, the physiological strain that they're under, how their body reacts to that, and then complementing it with data from a drone, a visual that can help you understand, okay, this is firefighter Smith, he went in this direction, these are the things that visually he was exposed to. I think all of those pieces will come together, but at the core of it is really that collection and analysis of data and how it can be used to inform decisions for the future.
Okay. So I think from a fire and rescue perspective, firefighter safety has always been very much high on the priority. Is there a way that we can make sure that people recognise new technology as being that advantage that is going to save lives, is going to protect employees, is ultimately therefore going to protect our communities? Is there a way that we make sure that information goes forward to deal with the naysayers who might see it as being a gimmick, an expensive investment in the future? How do MSA approach that to convince people?
I think you have to build value into the system. If it's technology for the sake of technology, it's not going to solve a problem, and then we're kind of pushing rope into a market that you're trying to convince is this a gimmick. I think when you start with an unmet need, when you start with an opportunity or a problem that you can solve, using technology to solve that problem and then demonstrating the value to the customer is really the path to success. I think it's not sitting in a laboratory and trying to think up the future, but it's listening to the market, understanding where there's opportunities, and then using technology to solve those problems, to make the job safer, to make it more efficient, all of the things that everyone would kind of nod their head and say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. How could we do our job without this? And so we look at a product like Lunar that we recently launched. It's a search and rescue product, but there's a clear need in an emergency situation, to be able to actively find someone. How we solve that is there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but we work through an understanding of the problem and applying technology to solve it. I think it sounds basic and fundamental, but there's some art to it as well.
Really grateful for your attendance today, and thank you to the speakers. I think this is just really sort of clipped the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can look at in terms of emerging technology. So I'd like to thank you for giving up your time and coming here today. I'd like to thank MSA for giving us the opportunity, but in particular I'd like to thank the panel who I think have been fantastic and who I know will be hanging around after the event if you've got any further questions for them. So can I just ask you to show your appreciation? Thank you.